Okay, so good morning, everybody. So as promised, I have got a number of workshop tutorials and this one or this set of tutorials are all around diabetes, and I'm so delighted to have with me today Karen Lewis, who I'll let you introduce yourself. That's probably the best thing to do. So.
Okay. Well, hello everybody. My name's Karen Lewis. So I qualified as a registered nurse in 1984. And for the last 5 years of my career, I specialised in diabetes. So I was a diabetes specialist nurse. And then I retired about 3 years ago, which you could do if you joined back in the day. You could go when you were 55. So I retired 3 years ago. And I started working on the diabetes prevention programme. So for a number of years, I've been very interested in health and well-being. And now I work on diabetes prevention.
Okay, Karen. So we've looked at what diabetes is, the fact that there are no necessarily signs that you're heading that way. We've talked about what actually happens within the body as far as our importance of our pancreas and our quality of our insulin that we produce, and some of the factors that impact on that. We've talked about the tests, which are really important, about attending wellbeing. What I'd like to ask you now really is, why are there so many people that are heading towards type 2 diabetes? What can be done, and why is it so important that we actually get a control on this and we become proactive rather than reactive? Why does somebody not want to get type 2 diabetes?
Okay.
Why is it so important so later on in life? I know type 1, you're maybe have it very early on and you take control of that, and it's much more about a lifestyle pattern that you develop over a period of time. But for type 2 diabetes people, it can be really, really hard. Why is that? Why are we in the state
Well,
that we're in?
I'd call it modern life. So when I think about my grandmother and the way that her life was, she didn't have machines to help with washing or anything like that. So physically she didn't have a car. She'll have walked down to the shops. We're busy people, we work, and we're trying to juggle so many things. So obviously we are more sedentary. Often our job may be in front of a computer. And as I say, we're trying to, juggle all sorts of different things in our lives now. So it could be that we're just not moving as much as we were because life has changed, and, we do get in the car. So sedentary lifestyle, because we're working, perhaps we don't have the time, or it's very difficult to cook from scratch as perhaps our mothers or grandmothers would have done. And when we go to the supermarket and we get perhaps pre-prepared meals, ready meals, when you start looking at labels, there's a lot of fat, there's a lot of salt, and there's a lot of sugar and preservatives in these meals that we don't realise perhaps how much sugar we are taking on board, or we don't have the time to focus on eating well.
So I think that's really interesting, actually, Karen, that people don't always read labels, and they don't know what's products that they're actually eating. And one of the things I was really surprised about was all the condiments. So things like your apple sauce and your jellies and even tomato ketchup. The amount of sugar that is hidden within those things that we don't always
absolutely. And sometimes they're not even called sugar, they're called things like dextrose or sucrose or corn syrup, or so it's difficult. So we're busy people, we've got fast lives, so it's difficult perhaps to move as much as we used to. It's difficult perhaps to focus on food, the way that our parents might have cooking from scratch. So there's issues around that. And on the back of that, it's very easy to gain weight because of that, the way we are. As I say, we're using laptops, we're not physically doing perhaps as much as we were. And then there's the stress element, because we've talked about the fact that if we carry weight, our blood sugars can go up. If we're having a lot of sugar in our food, it can affect our blood sugar. If we've got sedentary lifestyle, it can impact on our risk for diabetes. And stress we've talked before that when we're stressed, sugar's released into the blood. And modern life, I mean, the year we've had, I mean, and the stress on individuals. So modern life can be stressful.
Mm.
That's not to say that we cannot get our blood sugar down. Certainly, if we, the diabetes prevention program is there to help people and give them precise instructions and materials and support to do that. So there is help out there. And it is things like trying to be more active. So we don't have to necessarily join a gym. Perhaps, when we're back to normal, let's walk to the shop rather than getting the car. Let's rather than take the lift, let's take the stairs. We could move more. We could start trying to cook a little bit more from scratch and being a little bit more focused. Convenience foods are important, but when we cook, instead of making one, let's batch some things up so we've got our own healthier convenience food in the fridge, or freezer. And we could, as you say, you've got your meditation that you talk about, Louise. We could try and manage stress and perhaps monitor our weight. So it's not easy with modern life. I would never, there is a complete no blame culture around this because it is modern life, it's very difficult sometimes to counteract that. And we know often that the cheaper foods that we buy are perhaps going to be more carbohydrate heavy, things like pizzas, buy one, get one free. If we've got families to feed and we've got a limited amount of money, we have to do what we can, but there are ways around that. Frozen vegetables are just as good as fresh. But we're not really taught this at school either. We're not taught this, are we?
And it is very much, it is the knowledge. Knowledge is power, isn't it? And I think what's so good about the diabetes prevention program is that it educates.
Yes.
Some of the basic fundamental things that actually our national curriculum is missing, and that we have to sort of go out and actually find that information. But not wanting to turn anybody into a sort of a paranoid, checking absolutely everything. But if you're not tracking or you're not checking, you've actually got no idea. And I think we as individuals, we always believe that we drink more water than we do. We always we don't drink as much alcohol as we do. We always think we're doing more exercise. And actually sometimes just to take a snapshot and to say, right, I'm going to track everything I eat in a day, it can be really enlightening.
Oh, it can. And research shows we have about 845 more calories than we think we do. And but I mean, it is modern life. It's, that's why the levels are high. People do get diabetes, and people can live well with diabetes if and again, it's all the things we've talked about, lifestyle changes. People with diabetes need to be aware of. They need to think about their exercise. They need to think about eating well, maintaining a healthy weight, and trying to manage stress. And people can live well with diabetes. Okay.
So can we just finish off then? And I don't really want to, again, scare anybody into sort of, being really worried. But actually, sometimes I think it's really important to actually know what are the long-term complications. You've mentioned them in a couple of times. Somebody who does decide to ignore everything and ends up with a very, very high level of sugar in their blood over a long period of time. What are the long-term complications? Why is diabetes actually so serious?
It is a serious condition. That type 2 and type 1 are equivalent because the long-term complications of poor blood sugar control are the same for both. So there's no one diabetes that's simpler than another. I mean, I'm just reassuring people here who may have family members who are diabetic. The aim for people who are diabetic is to get their blood sugar as normal as possible. And when they do that, they have a much greater, reduction of risk of getting long-term complications of diabetes. So, I've got a good friend. She's been a nurse. She's 64. She's had type 1 diabetes since she's 11. She's had children. She lived a very healthy life, but she puts the work in.
Absolutely.
The work is her weight, what she's eating, so it's not easy. So the first thing I'd say to people is taking a tablet isn't going to manage, your blood sugar. You have to still put the work in. But, it's possible to live well with diabetes.
Okay.
For those that are not managing their diabetes well, the issue is that when you've got raised blood sugar over a long period of time, it causes changes to your blood vessels. And that's why there are so many long-term complications of diabetes. And we've talked before, Louise, haven't we, about people can be asymptomatic and
Mhm.
have diabetes for a long time before they know they've got it. So that's why it's so important we go for our checks.
Our body is so flipping amazing. It
Yeah,
is, when you look, you're talking about blood vessels, when you look at the kind of the map, it's like the motorway map of the
yeah,
whole,
yeah,
the
yeah,
UK. Our
yeah,
blood vessels go everywhere, don't they?
yeah, yeah,
And,
they do.
and our body, I think, is so clever at doing such a lot of really good work to mask things, and to, it's a bit, well, I'll do a bit more over here, and I'll make that
Yeah,
go a bit kind of
yeah,
wobbly, because if I do that, then I can keep this going. But there does come a point, doesn't there, where it's not capable, and if the blood vessels start to break down.
yeah. That's where you get into trouble. And yes, and as I said, sometimes these signs and symptoms, because type 2, which is the vast 90% of cases, is associated with, certainly in the white population, with being middle-aged and older,
Yeah,
slightly younger in the black and Asian population. But because of that, we put some of these signs and symptoms we've talked about, being tired,
mm,
passing, we put that down to aging. So we sometimes there are no symptoms, or we miss the symptoms. The issue is, if we've had this long term and it's poorly, we've had no control over the blood sugar, we get changes to blood vessels. So we can get eye disease because we've got changes to the blood vessels of our eyes. We can get kidney disease. People are aware there's a higher incidence of stroke or heart attack if you've got poorly controlled diabetes. We know about the circulation problems to the lower limbs. As I say, it's changes to blood vessels. So there is no simple diabetes,
no,
because if you're poorly controlled blood sugar, you get changes to blood vessels. And as you say, the blood vessels go everywhere.
yeah.
That's why there are so many long-term complications associated.
The the vessels that are affected, they're not really choosy which vessels. We're talking every single vessel, aren't
Yes,
we? Is it
big
sort of,
blood, the bigger blood vessels and the smaller ones, both of them are
and in
affected.
all parts of the body? So
Yes,
it's not,
blood goes yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, the sugar in the blood goes everywhere. So it's more about long-term, poorly controlled diabetes. That's why sometimes people will present 10 years down the line with one of these complications.
mm,
And that's when we find out that they're diabetic. Because with type 2 diabetes, you're producing some insulin, but it's either not enough or not good enough quality. Whereas type 1, you'd know immediately because there's none produced. So
yes,
people get into trouble very quickly, but you can live, and we think there's 1.5 million people out there that have got type 2 diabetes and don't know.
that's
So
very worrying, isn't it?
it's
Okay, so then lastly, let's finish up with the diabetes prevention program, and
yeah,
where can people access this? We've talked about well man and well women, so
yeah, yeah.
every surgery would be more than happy if anybody just rang up and said, I'm concerned, I've done maybe I've looked at the amount of, or looked at my lifestyle, and I'm concerned, I want to know. You
Yeah,
got that.
yeah. Well, I think HbA1c tests are only done once a year, even if your blood sugar's elevated, because it's a 3-month turnaround for change to occur anyway. Sometimes they'll do it more frequently than that. The NICE guidelines, National Institute for Clinical Excellence, which guide practitioners in this country, says it only needs to be done once a year.
Okay.
So there is that, that and actually what would happen is if you went along and it was that pre-diabetic range between 42 and 47, you're going to get referred.
Yeah.
If you have a finger prick test and your blood sugar at that time is up, that 5.6 to 6.9, you will get a referral onto the programme. You can go on the Diabetes UK website, look at your risk, and if it's a certain number and above, you'll get all the information there. You can directly refer to the Diabetes Prevention Programme. Work is being done at the moment to teach people over the phone, with books being sent in the post, or there are online sessions for people that have got computers and they can access resources online. So generally, it's a standard now that if your blood tests come back from your well man or well woman appointment and they're abnormal with raised blood sugar within a pre-diabetic range, you will get referred. It's a national NHS prevention programme. So you would get that, but you can look at your own risk on Diabetes UK website, and that it will give you all the information about referring on, because obviously what we can't do at the moment is bombard GP practices.
No.
They're so busy and they're not necessarily the safest place you'd be going. You could phone if you've had an HbA1c test and you want to know what it is. As I said, anything from 20 to 41 is normal. You could check it out that way if you wanted to. A lot of people can ask for a password to look at their results online from their GP practice as well. So you could check yourself that way. You know, but the main thing really is to prevent, and it's all the work you're doing really, Louise. It's about, you know, if we're able to exercise within our limits, look at a healthy diet, try and maintain a healthy weight, and try and manage stress. And if we do those things, we're not only preventing diabetes, we're preventing so many health conditions, you see, aren't we? Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Karen. Hopefully this has really prompted people to think about becoming proactive rather than reactive. And within any of the groups that this video is going out to, I will monitor them. If there is anybody that wants to private message us with, you know, needing some more support or guidance, then we can do that as well.
Happy to come back anytime, Louise. And what I would also say is the diabetes prevention programme is not a nagging service. Nobody's put on the spot. We just give advice and we never comment. We just want to help people. It would be very friendly, very informal. Nobody's ever asked a question, or it's very friendly, but nobody has ever asked nagged about anything.
If there's anybody out there that has been on a diabetes injury,
diabetes prevention program,
you know, put a comment in the post. Let us know, you know, what it was like for you, you know, whether you've changed your lifestyle dramatically, and if there's any advice that you can give anybody else as well. So
okay,
thank you very much, Karen.
Bye everybody.